Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Budapest Student Broadcast. Please enjoy.
Hi guys, welcome to the Budapest Student Broadcast, and we are back today with our fourth episode, and I'm your host Dimant. Today, for the first time, we are streaming live, and we would like to get some participation from the viewers. So please feel free to ask any questions or express your views and comments at the end of the interview with our guest today. And in this episode, we will be talking to Mr. Alex MacIntosh, who is a presentation coach based in Budapest. Alex is an accomplished and truly prolific public speaker whom I have personally witnessed deliver really engaging speeches. He coaches people in various forms of public speaking and helps them improve other communication skills as well. And he's also very actively involved in helping the homeless community here in Budapest. And we are very glad to have him on our show today. So welcome, Alex, to the Budapest Student Broadcast. And how are you doing?
Hi, Dimant. I'm great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's a pleasure to have you on our show. So let's start off by maybe asking you a bit about your student life and where you went to university and what did you initially study?
Okay. So thinking back to my student life, I have great memories of my university days at the University of New Brunswick in Fredericton, New Brunswick, in Canada, of course. I'm Canadian, so and this was about 2 hours from my hometown. So it was really nice. On the weekends, if I wanted, I could go home, recharge, do my laundry, that kind of thing. And my first year, I studied computer science. And I did that because of, the explosion of tech that we're still experiencing.
Yeah.
But I found out after one semester that it wasn't really for me, and my brain just doesn't really think in ones and zeros as much as I hoped it would. And after my first year in computer science, I switched faculties to business, and I concentrated in marketing, which was a much, much better fit for me, and it's where I still am today. So I'm glad I made that switch, but I had to go an extra year of university, but I didn't mind because I loved it there so much.
Yes, I can totally relate to that because I studied law for 5 years, and I realized a lot later than you because I had to start working, and I had spent a couple of years working for me to realize that this was not really what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And now I'm also in communication and media and studying at Corvinus, and I enjoy this far better than what I was doing previously. And talking about your university years, when after you switched over to business, what were your interests and goals during those years? When you're in university, what were your plans?
The only thing I can think of, that comes to mind, the first thing I can think of was that my plan was, after I graduated, was to go to England to work in a pub. And then with that money, I was going to travel around Europe. Well, that plan didn't happen quite that way. Although I did work in a bar, I stayed in Canada. And then I moved to the capital city of Ottawa to try and use my marketing degree. The thing that was holding me back, that I realized that I'd never thought of before, was languages. And in Canada, we speak English and French, but it's really important with companies when they hire that they really want bilingual people, even though you might be working 100% in English. It's part of their company culture to hire people that speak both languages, and that really held me back. So when I had an opportunity to go to South Korea, I took it, and that was kind of the start of my professional journey.
And did you start learning Korean?
In Korea, I was studying Korean. Yeah.
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 And yeah, how many languages do you speak now?
So I still really, when people ask me this question, I tend to make a joke about, how many languages I've started but haven't really completed. Because I've been in Budapest for 3 years, I've kind of lost my Korean. I do speak a tiny bit of Hungarian, but it's really English that I focus on most. So I'm one of those maybe rare people who don't really speak any language for any foreign language, and I don't mind putting my energy into other things.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. I think here we're all studying it now at Corvinus. Most of the people are bilingual, but yes, I think that's one of the major things, especially if you're moving abroad, to be able to have at least two languages that you can speak is quite vital to survive in and to have a career in an international atmosphere.
Yeah, if I could do it again, I would have done the French, and I would have also maybe learned Chinese as well. But for my chosen profession, I work in English. I help people communicate in English, and so for me, lucky for me, it's not learning multiple languages has not had an impact on my career, but I'm sure it would be much easier in the consultation phase if I could speak a different language. But I think my lucky stars that I came from an English speaking country, because without it I don't know where I'd be.
Yes, yes, that's true. And now you're a public. You help people with their public speaking. So I
Yeah.
would like to ask you, how did you first get interested in public speaking when you were young?
Uh-huh. So it wasn't that many years ago, actually. It was only about 7 years ago. I went to my first Toastmasters meeting, and I was blown away by the speaker who was on the stage. And his name was Bob Kinzel, and he's a special type of public speaker. He started his speech by saying, if you want to interrupt me to challenge what I'm saying anytime during the speech, please do so. And at the end, I invite you to ask any question you like that is counters my opinion, because this is the experience that I'm looking for today. And then he went on to give his talk. Nobody's interrupted him, and not many people ask questions either. But I was just so blown away by his confidence and his belief in himself that I talked to him afterwards, and I joined his Toastmasters club. Became the president a couple of years later, and then from that point on, I've been really involved in a lot of Toastmasters things, the contests, and being president of a club here as well.
Yes, and that's indeed where I first met you, and I was also very impressed by your speech. I think you were evaluating somebody's speech the first time I saw you speak, and I also felt the same thing that you described. I really admired your confidence and the way in which you spoke and how you articulated yourself really well. And for people, yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, and for people who might not know about Toastmasters, could you please tell them a bit about what Toastmasters exactly is?
Sure. So Toastmasters is a place where you can go, usually once a week, to work on public speaking skills and leadership skills. There's different pathways that you can choose depending on your goals and your career, and Toastmasters has a step-by-step process to bring you from a beginner to a more experienced public speaker. And the meetings have structures, and there's different positions in each meeting, and those change every week to keep it quite fresh. And for example, there's a timer, there's someone who takes care of listening for good use of English and improper use of English. There's someone who counts the many times people say or ah, and they give reports, and it's quite fun actually, and it's all about speaking in front of people. And I teach this stuff as well, and a lot of my clients come to me to get advice and help when they are giving a speech or a talk or anything. And it's really that experience that Toastmasters gives you, to stand on the stage and let 30 sets of eyes look at you. And we're not used to that normally, and it makes most people feel uncomfortable. But over time, you get used to it, and then it's no big deal. You can be yourself. You can be natural. But it takes that, they say 10,000 hours to master something. I wouldn't say it's quite that many hours, but it's definitely, the more times you get up there, the less of a threat it feels like, especially when you think about the very first time. So Toastmasters gives you that stage time that's really necessary for when you step out into the real world. It's not so nerve-wracking. And Toastmasters is a place where you can practice, and practice and fail. It's kind of like an experimentation laboratory, You can try different combinations of different things. Sometimes it's a great achievement that you uncover. Sometimes it blows up, and it's a disaster. But the good news is that it's a place for practice, and no one ever really remembers week to week. Yeah.
Yes, that's true. I think for someone who's maybe petrified of speaking in public, but are interested in, at least starting, baby stepping their way towards competence in public speaking, what would your advice be to them? Where do they start? Of course, getting to Toastmasters would be a great thing, but what are some things that they could do to slowly start down this road?
Since I started coaching professionally, I see these trends in the people that I coach, it's like it starts in their mindset, really. The first thing that people feel that they have to be perfect, but public speaking is not a performance. It's not like a piano recital or a stage actor. It's not like that. Those things can be perfect, flawless. But public speaking is more of a conversation between you and a big group of people. And you're having that conversation with one person at a time in the audience. And that is a fundamental shift in the way that people see public speaking, because then it's not so much pressure, and that's the first step, is lower the pressure, because no one's expecting anyone to be perfect. In fact, the more polished your speech is, the more robotic it might feel to the audience, and that makes it less impactful. So perfection is really no place in public speaking. Now, practice is a different story, and the more we practice, of course, the better that we feel, the more comfortable we are. But I would say that mindset is first, and the second thing is people often feel the need to memorize something, and again, that kind of lends itself to performance, which public speaking is not. If I write something and I memorize it and I deliver it, as I'm speaking, I'm going into my mind to pull out those words that I memorized, and it's a very internal process. Well, public speaking is about connecting to the audience, so we have to really be external in order to make a big impact. So instead of focusing on text, we should try to remember our points, of course, in the order that we want to talk about them, but not be married to the way we do it. Because when we do that, if we're to miss our spot, if we're to even reverse a couple of words, we lose our place, and the whole house of cards falls. If I know which points I want to hit, and I'm not, I'm not set on how I want to explain them, I just want to be there with the audience and explain them, it comes out much more conversational and a lot more human,
Yeah, so I think you mentioned a lot of good points there. It starts with the mindset, and I think this is the first time I've heard someone say that public speaking is more about a conversation with each person who's in the audience rather than a performance. And Yeah, I think what you mentioned, I've had personal experience with that where I memorized something and then as soon as I missed one line, then I went blank. So, like you mentioned, maybe having the topics and the things that you need to talk about, and then kind of having an idea. But like you said, having practiced something always gives you more confidence when you go out there to speak in public.
Yeah, and if I could add one more thing, and
Hmm.
it's this the idea that your speech or the reason why you're on stage is not about it's not for you, the speaker, right? You're not, of course, in Toastmasters we're getting better at public speaking. That's what we get, but in the process we have to give to the audience, and that's another part of the mindset is that when you get on stage, you believe that what you're about to say is going to have a point and it's going to make some impact and make the lives of the audience better somehow. Maybe it's to inspire them, maybe it's just to give them information, maybe to entertain them, but there's a reason and you are there to give them something. Now, with that in mind, we're kind of at work when we get on stage. And when we're at work, it's not about us. It's not about my ego, how I look. I'm there to do a job. And that tends to remove all of that pressure that's associated with our ego once we're on stage. You know, the stage fright is all about
Yeah.
ego. I don't want to look bad. I don't want to sound stupid. I. We forget that the reason why we're there, it's for the audience, you know? And that shift tends to make all the difference. And it's the same thing whenever, you know, we're at work and maybe we have to make a phone call, you know, if to someone who doesn't know that we're calling them. Well, if we're doing it in a work capacity, it seems so much easier to do than if it was me, myself, Alex calling and on my own behalf. Those are two totally different worlds. And the more serious we take it from a work perspective, the more effort we put into it, the more we treat it like it's a professional thing, and it makes all the difference. It really does.
Yes, I agree with you. I think the ego has a lot to do with the fear of public speaking. In fact, it's considered to be one of the most feared things, a worldwide fear that all of us share. So I think we would gain a lot of benefits from overcoming this fear. And for youngsters and of course young professionals as well who are thinking about improving their public skills, what do you think are the top benefits that one could gain by really dedicating themselves to getting really competent at public speaking?
So let's see. To be able to string together a few points in a cohesive manner with an introduction and a conclusion that matches, that fits together. This is a skill that we use throughout our lives, not just in front of an audience, but in job interviews, on dates, if you ever have to go to court, God forbid, and just in our day-to-day lives. You know, no matter what your job is, there's a good chance that at some point you have to communicate with somebody, and learning about your communication style and what resonates with audiences is such a good thing to know and good thing to practice that the benefits keep showing up in different ways that I didn't even realize year after year after year. And the more that, so for people that are listening and maybe they're thinking that, oh, public speaking is not for me and it's, I could never do that. Those are the type of people who I think need it the most, because it seems so scary to them. But I promise everybody who goes to Toastmasters, it does get better, and it gets incrementally better in some people, and it's huge leaps forward week by week for other people. But one thing is for sure, it gets better. Of course, it feels uncomfortable at first. You feel like you feel like emotional pain even. I did as well. But that's a sign that you're growing, you know? When we're babies and our teeth come in, it hurts, but it's worth it because we need those things. Public speaking is like teeth in your life. You need them. And if you don't have them, you kind of walk around disabled in many ways. So it's something that if you are, the more scared you are of it, the more you should start to work on it.
Yes, I agree. I think a lot of people have this misconception that really good public speakers are born that way, or they have some inherent traits that make them good, and that if you don't have them, then you're never going to be good at public speaking, which I feel is not true. And I would like to get your views on it. Do you feel that public speaking is a skill that anybody, regardless of whether they're introverted, extroverted, shy, can acquire with enough practice?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one thing one difference that I will point out is that one public speaker cannot be the same type of public speaker as another person. You know, I can't be Steve Jobs no matter how much I practice it. I'm not Steve Jobs. I never will be. Neither will you or anyone else. So, but what we can do is become the best public speaker that we can be for our personality. And our personality is a huge part of our public speaking ability, because it's the human side and the vulnerable side, and those are really important to include when you're speaking to an audience, because you need to connect to them. And we've all seen on TV or in movies or somewhere, maybe live, a person on stage who is a little bit arrogant, a little bit unlikable, you know, a little bit pushy, maybe a salesperson, and it really like pushes us away. And the reason for that is maybe a little bit too much ego going into the presentation, and not enough of this human, vulnerable, I'm just a guy, but I'm here to give you something. And this is the thing, that each person is different, has their own experience in life, and that comes with them on stage. And that's what makes everybody interesting. Absolutely interesting is their impression, their take, their experience in life.
Yes. I think, like you mentioned, we couldn't probably emulate the way another person speaks when it comes to their speeches and presentations, but we could definitely be the best version of ourselves when it comes to public speaking. Yeah. And another thing I wanted to ask you about is that a lot of our viewers are not non-native speakers of English. So, of course, when you're not a native speaker and you have to present or speak in public in English, there is more anxiety, not only with regards to public speaking, but also when it comes to their language. Yeah. So what are some tips that you would give somebody who is a non-native speaker to improve their English, as well as, of course, become more confident speaking publicly in English?
Great question. Almost all of my clients are non-native speakers of English. And the first thing I will tell you is that as the audience is the most important thing, right? Depends on who is listening. Now, whether it's non-native speakers or native speakers, we are not judged on our ability to speak English if we're not a native speaker. So what I mean by that is, I'm a native speaker. I'm expected to not make any grammar mistakes. I'm expected to not confuse the meanings of words. I'm held to a higher standard for my language. Someone who's a non-native speaker can get away with some mistakes. So being perfect should not be any goal that you're driving towards. However, what should be a goal that you push toward is using short sentences, using short vocabulary words that make it very easy for people to listen to you. And I talk about this with all of my clients, the mental friction required to understand you. Now, I just used a few big words there. That took some mental computation to understand the mental friction required. As public speakers, it's our job to make it easy for the audience to understand and listen to us. We have to grade our language lower, make the sentences shorter, and make it almost effortless for the audience to listen. If we want our message to get through, that's the best way to do it. And it's no surprise that Barack Obama speaks at an 8th grade level. You know, Donald Trump speaks at a 5th grade level. And there's a reason for that. The difference between a written speech and a spoken speech. it's so clear. When we write or when we read something, we have an infinite number of chances to go back and read it again to make sure we understand it. We can look up a word if we have to, but when we're listening to someone speak, we have one chance to get it because we can't rewind, we can't ask a question. And for that reason, as public speakers, we really have to put a lot of effort into making the message clear, hammering the points that we're trying to make by repeating them, restating them, and making it absolutely clear what we're trying to say. So from that, knowing that, there's no benefit to being a native speaker as a non-native speaker. It's a level playing field, and if we look at the Toastmasters World Champion of Public Speaking as some kind of microcosm of public speaking, we can see that a lot of the time, at least half the time, the champion is non-native speaker.
Okay, so you feel that there's not really that much of an advantage that a native speaker has, because effective public speaking is basically about simplifying what you have to say and connecting with the audience. So it would be better for somebody to rather simplify their language when they're speaking publicly.
Right, right. Now, I'm not saying that it's easier for one or the other. It's probably easier for me because it's my native language and I've only worked in my native language. I'm not saying that. It's extremely difficult to give a speech in a foreign language, I'm sure. But the point is not to try to sound more like a native speaker, but to make it accessible and digestible for the audience, because you're giving them one spoon at a time of your information, and the bigger the bite, the more difficult it is for the audience. And I often use this analogy of, as a public speaker on stage, you're the bus driver, and your first order of business is to get everybody on your bus, right? Throughout the speech, you're taking twists and turns. If you're not careful, people will fall off the bus, and if they fall off the bus, it's almost impossible to get them back on. So we have to take great care to analyze the audience, to speak to them in terms that they're going to understand. And if we're using big long sentences, big long words, I call them $10 words. The more $10 words we use to maybe make our ego feel good, oh, I'm so smart, the more we do that, the more we kind of push the audience away. When we use accessible language, we pull them towards us because they get us. They totally understand. It's so clear. Audiences love that. So this is something that we all should strive to do. I'm still working on that. How do I make this more clear? How do I make this point absolutely memorable tomorrow when the guy is, eating his breakfast and he's thinking about my speech? How do I make that? How do I burn this into his memory?
Yes, that's true. And moving on to another topic, which I wanted to discuss with you. As we know, nowadays, VR technology is becoming a big thing in education. And I had heard of a public presentation simulator where a person can practice in speaking in front of a virtual crowd that reacts. Have you heard of it, and what do you think about it?
I've heard about it. This is the second time I've heard about it. I mean, I think it's interesting, and if it gives you that fear of public speaking, then that's a sign that it works. But I think it might be just another gimmick, because people that are afraid of public speaking will go to great lengths to avoid feeling that pain, and maybe this is one way. But one way that I've always asked my clients to practice is using an eye contact video on YouTube, which is kind of the same thing. If you go to YouTube and you type in eye contact practice, you'll see a bunch of videos where the people are just looking at the camera, reacting in different ways. And that's good practice, because you need to focus on speaking while making eye contact. And it's kind of like playing an instrument and singing, you have to disassociate one from the other. It's kind of a difficult skill to practice, which is why a lot of people, when they're starting public speaking, they don't make the eye contact.
Yes.
Because it starts to trigger things in their mind, and they want to focus on one thing. But for anyone that's ever played an instrument and then learned to sing, at one point it just all clicks together. And this is really why Toastmasters is such a great thing, because it's practice to do that, you know. I haven't tried the simulator, but I would love to. I would love to check it out and do a review on it, actually.
Yes, I think I agree with what you say. The moment I don't feel eyes on me, or I don't look at the people who are looking at me, is instantly you have a kind of a buffer and you feel more comfortable. And actually, I wanted to ask you about that. Now with the pandemic, everything is moving online, and most of the presentations at university we are delivering online, as well as in most workplaces, everything is going online. So what would you say are the differences between doing a very effective online presentation as opposed to an in-person one? Are there any differences, and how can one get better at online presentations?
Sure, that's maybe the most important question right now is how do you give better presentations? It starts with the tech, I think. I have a softbox light setup here. Lights are important to have good lighting. I have my laptop sitting on top of two shoe boxes, so I'm looking slightly up, which is always better than looking down. Although what you're doing right now, doesn't make me feel bad or anything, but audiences generally like it when they're being looked up to. That's just kind of a subconscious thing, I believe. But also, you know, we tend to present better when our chin is going up rather than our chin is going down. You know, and you can see my eyes better when I'm my chin is tilted up. So it's really about presenting oneself in the best possible light, which is why I've done these things that I'm doing today. And this is how I do my coaching as well. But as far as the content goes, it is different. It's fundamentally different. And when I give a presentation or a speech, usually I put my laptop on a chair on my table and I stand up. And this allows me to use my arms a bit more, and I can feel my weight on my legs, and it gets my blood pumping, and I can get more excited. It's just like singing, you know. When you use your voice, it comes out better when you're standing up for some reason. And that's a fundamental thing that I would suggest everybody do, is stand up if you have to give a presentation at work, or if you're doing a job interview. Do not sit down. Get ready to stand up, and you will immediately separate yourself from other people, because most people sit down. That's one thing, simple thing. Put a chair on your table, stand up, and you'll be more animated. You will seem to have more energy, because you will have more energy, because you can't relax your legs. So that's one thing. The second thing is, in a presentation, I use a ton of props. I use things. I show things into the camera, you know. I don't have a lot with me right now, but just little things, you know, like, and they're little items of interest that catch our eye, because our eyes and our attention spans are quite limited. And when we just see a person's face with nothing new entering, we tend to get bored quickly with that. So I would say props are something that you can use. In all my speeches that I've done online, I've used at least 3 props, pieces of items that I've shown into the camera, whether it's a newspaper or a drink of something, or some kind of noisemaker. I use objects in the speech to cement my points, and as examples of things. So that's one thing that we can do. Of course, we can use this space as well, and most people don't use that space. They might use the side-to-side space, but they don't use this plane, and that's something that you can't really do if you're sitting down. But if you're standing up, I can get really close to the camera. Adds a different dimension, and it's again something to keep people's attention span, keep their attention on you. So those are the things that I would suggest that people try.
Yeah, I think that was really helpful. So next time I'm making sure that I'm looking up. And I think I've been doing most of my speaking or presentations online with this kind of a setup. And yeah, I completely agree. The moment you stand up, it's completely different the way you feel. And it gives you more space to maybe maneuver and use your body. And so basically, the tips include trying to make an online presentation as close as possible to how you would be speaking if you were in person. Am I right?
Well, I would say yes. In many ways, yes. But one thing that I see a lot of people do that I don't find as effective is playing around with backgrounds and filters, Snapchat filters.
Yeah.
I think that's a novelty that has worn off, and it's no longer interesting or exciting to do that. Now, with one exception, Prezi has a dynamic presentation, like Prezi Video is a really cool thing where you're almost like a newscaster. Are you familiar with it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm aware
So
of
you're
it.
off to one side and your slides
Yeah.
are scrolling this way. I think that's beautiful, and it's really eye-catching, and it looks more like TV. That's my favorite tech advancement in online presenting. But the filters and the backgrounds, for me, it just shows a kind of it's a distraction from the content, which is not the point of a presentation.
Okay, yes. And well, we're talking about the virus, and I wanted to ask you, because you're now you mainly help people, coach them in public speaking. How has the virus affected your work? Do you now offer online teaching, or what are some things that people who are stuck at home, like we are now in Budapest practically because of the curfew and the new regulations, what are some things that we could do to make productive use of our time in isolation?
Yeah, well, that's another great question. So when we first locked down the first time in March, all of the conferences were canceled, and even up until August. So a lot of the clients that I had booked no longer needed me, and it took a little bit of creativity to find other clients that I could help. But slowly, those conferences moved online. And since then, a lot of those clients have come back because those conferences were just moved online in the last few months. So I'm still doing speech coaching and pitch coaching for startups. Any high pressure public speaking engagement is what I help people with. And there's still lots of that going on, the digital conferences and those kinds of things. In fact, it might even be an advantage for what I do, because a lot of these digital conferences are recorded, put on YouTube, they're immortalized on the internet, and that makes the stakes higher for some people, whereas in the live presentations, the live conferences, they would only do that with the keynote speeches, put them online. But now the entire conference is online, so there's maybe more of a need for what I do. So that was the first part of the question. About coronavirus, what was the second part of the question again?
I was just asking you, what do you think how's some ways where we can use our time productively now that we're isolated and we have many restrictions.
Right.
Yeah.
So many opportunities with the coronavirus locking us all down. The first one is let's go with Toastmasters. So there is a Toastmasters meeting. There are in the world there are 16,600 clubs. 16,600 clubs that meet every week or every 2 weeks. And now that most of them are online, all the European ones are online. you can visit a different Toastmasters club every day. Often, you can visit 2 a day. So no matter what your schedule is, you can fit Toastmasters into your life. And if for people who haven't, there's no excuse not to try it, because for whatever reason, if you don't like it, if it's not, maybe the topics aren't interesting to you, just one click and you are out. You don't have to stand up and excuse me and get your coat and leave the room. You just click and bounce. So I do that. I go to these online meetings and start up pitch camps and these little things that are online, and I'm just curious about them. I check them out and I give them 15 minutes, and if it doesn't catch my attention, I just check out. So there's so many events that you can participate in, or even just take a look. Take a look first, and then if you like it, you can go back. And the second thing is that everything's free. Toastmasters is not free. To be a member, it's not free. And to a lot of these other conferences, the tickets are crazy expensive. But now that everything's online, everything's free. And that is a huge thing that we can take advantage of, both to network, so that when we do get, when the lockdown's lifted, we can meet those people in person, have a coffee with them, and grow our network. So that's one thing that we can do. And the second is build our skills up. So I know a lot of your listeners are students. They're going to be looking for jobs soon, and or maybe they are now.
Yeah.
More things that we can add to our repertoire of experiences, the more we set ourselves apart from everybody else. And that is what will get you hired. It's not about being like everybody else, but a little bit better. It's about having a full-rounded skill set, focused on personal growth, that really catches employers' eyes. And I know that because I've hired people in Canada, and that's exactly what I was looking for. People that are serious about doing good work, people who are serious about improving themselves, and people that aren't wasting their time. So if you can demonstrate those things, you will be irresistible to employers, regardless of how high your test scores are.
Yeah, that's good. I think, you're right. Many of our viewers are students, and they would definitely have found those tips really helpful, because they're searching for a job, and in this atmosphere with the pandemic, they're a bit worried about whether they can land jobs. So I think what you mentioned, using this time to just develop our skills and make ourselves, like you put it, irresistible, is probably the best formula to landing a job during these tough times. Now I would like to switch over, and there is another side of you completely, where you are helping the homeless community in Budapest through your Budapest Street Project. And I would like to ask you to tell us a bit about how that came about and what got you involved in this.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. When I first moved here in January 2018, I was amazed by the beautiful city. As you know, the Danube and both sides, and the parliament and the castle, everything was gorgeous, and not so many cars compared to where I was living, which was Seoul, South Korea, and before that in Ottawa, in Canada. But one thing that I wasn't prepared to see was the amount of people who were living on the sidewalk, in this busy city. And I remember I was walking down my street in the 6th district, and there was a homeless person laying on the sidewalk, and there was a bachelor party crossing as well. So that here was the homeless guy, and here was the bachelor party, and they all start to funnel around him. And I just thought how sad that was, that here's one group of people who are having, the time of their lives, and another, and a person who is having the hardest moment of their lives. And it was really shocking to see that. And in Canada, we don't really have a problem like this. And in Seoul South Korea, I didn't see that the level of homelessness as I do here. And it just really caught my attention, and it was all I could see after that, you know. And I couldn't just sit by and not do anything. I wanted to help somehow. But like most people, I didn't feel comfortable putting change in the cup, you know, when people are holding up the cup. I didn't feel comfortable doing that, and I knew that the money would be going to a place that wasn't helpful, it was only hurtful. I looked at a few volunteer organizations in Budapest, but none of them really seemed to be, I don't know, a good match for me. And so I thought I would try to start something. And I wanted to involve volunteers, and I also wanted to raise money to help these volunteer groups that are in Budapest. So although there's no tourists right now, what Budapest Street Project offers people, especially tourists, is an opportunity to give back. It's an alternative to putting money in the cup. It's a way that they can leave a positive footprint on the city of Budapest and not just, you know, party hard and leave, you know. Although the tourists bring a lot of economic relief to the city. We're feeling it right now, but I think there's a lot of people who want to do more than that. They see the condition of these people's lives. They want to help, but they have no idea how. And this is what Budapest Street Project provides. There's a couple of ways that they can help. One of them is they can buy a unique piece of Budapest art. We're partnered with several artists. And the second way is that they can pay for the Good Deeds Project, which is an event that we have every month where they can spend time with helping the homeless through various charities that are set up already in the city. And we have a website, of course, it's budapeststreetproject.com. And of course, coronavirus really took the wind from our sails this year, but we're building in ways that we're using this time wisely to build things so that when the tourists do come back, that we have an experience for them. We have things for that they can buy that will make Budapest unforgettable, and they can leave a piece of themselves here just to really put Budapest in their hearts. And this is what we're aiming to do.
Yes, I think that's wonderful. Like you mentioned, we all love the city, and it's really beautiful. And one blemish on the city is when we find lots of these homeless people around, pretty much spread throughout the city. And yeah, I think what you're doing is really great work to help them. And I was interested to know, how are the homeless people in the community taking to your efforts to help them? What's been their reaction or their response?
So I have a couple of stories for you. And the first one is about Clara. And Clara is a homeless woman that we met in Papa János 2 Tér. We went out, myself and a few other volunteers went out to try and interview some homeless people, to find out what was behind the homelessness, to find out how they became that way, and because what we were finding was that a lot of people, in their mind, they think, well, if that person's homeless, then they must have done something shitty with their lives. They took a wrong turn somewhere, and it's their fault somehow, right? Yeah. And we wanted to kind of test that hypothesis by interviewing people and finding out what their life was like before they were homeless. And it took us a while to find Clara, but we found her in this park, and she was happy to talk to us. And she explained that actually I won't go into too much detail because we have a video on the website all about Clara's story. Yeah,
I've watched that.
Yeah. But one thing, as we were talking to Clara, she interrupted the interviewer several times to say thank you. Thank you so much for talking to me. And then we would pick up the interview again, we'd get some momentum, and then she would stop and she'd say, thank you so much for stopping to talk. And after the third time she said that, through the translator, I asked her, like, you know, how come you keep saying this? And she said that most of the time that there's only two types of people that talk to her. and she doesn't like either of them. And the first one is other homeless people who are drunk, and they want something from her, whether it's something that she has or they want something. They're not there to give her anything. They're there to get something. And the second type was social workers. And we were quite surprised to hear that. Why wouldn't you want to talk to social workers? Well, she said that social workers also want something from her. They want her to eat more, drink more water, wash more, not drink as much. They want a lot of things. She hates them. Although they mean her well, she doesn't like them. But we came along, and all we were doing is we just wanted to talk. We didn't ask her for anything. We just wanted to talk to her, and she really liked that. And from that, we created the Good Deeds volunteer event, where we go into shelters and we just spend time with people. And unfortunately, because of Corona, we could only do it once, but it was a huge success. We were at the Alfoldi Utsa shelter. They gave us a little room. There was like 20 chairs. We brought in some board games and cards and things, and in shelter, and we played games with them. We had translators for the foreigners so they could ask questions and just have a discussion. But we had no agenda, just spend time, and it was wonderful. So much, in fact, that after the event, I interviewed the volunteers, and they seemed to forget actually where they were. They felt like they were more at somebody's family reunion or something. You know, they were playing chess with somebody's uncle, which is exactly what they were doing. They weren't doing anything with a homeless person. They were doing something with a person. And it's this label is the problem. And it's something that we're trying to it's a huge part of what we're doing to erase this from people's minds. It's not a homeless person. It's just a person first.
That's true. I think what you mentioned was very true. Even I've caught myself thinking that many a time when I come across a homeless person, that they probably, did something that ended with them being on the streets, and that it was not something that's beyond their control. But I've watched the video and the write-up about Clara, and I urge my viewers to really go to BudapestStreetProject.com and read, because that was eye-opening for me as well. And I think that completely changes our perception. Of course, there are people who have ended up there due to their own doing, but I think we tend to generalize when it comes to homeless people. And what the work you're doing helps us change our perception of them. Yeah. Well, anyways, thank you very much, Alex. And now I want to just dive into some questions that, since we're streaming live on YouTube, some questions that people have asked us. And I would like to, okay, one of the questions we have here is it possible for a person who is a non-native speaker to train themselves to speak like a native speaker? And I would also like to add, do you think it's worth the effort, or is it required?
Okay, great question. I've seen it happen many times. And as a teacher in South Korea, this was a question that the moms used to ask me all the time. And it is possible to speak like a native speaker, but the only way that I've seen it actually work is you have to move to a native speaking country. Yeah, and you have to assimilate and work and study and in your free time, and you're just submersed in the language. And that I think that's the only way, and it's the only way that I've been able to see it. There's a couple of exceptions where I've met people and I thought that they were native speakers, but they just studied really hard and they submersed themselves in English. So I think that's the common link is submersion. Yeah.
But do you think would you advise a non-native speaker to put in the effort to try sounding like a native speaker, or do you think that it's not really necessary you can still be competent at speaking English, but not necessarily sound like a native speaker?
Mm-hmm. And when you say sound like a native speaker, do you mean the accent or the word choice or both?
The accent primarily is, I think, I'm presuming, is what the question was about, because I think, definitely want to improve our word choice and attain a better level of English, the knowledge of the language. But I think they were talking about the accent.
Uh-huh. For me, if the accent gets in the way of communication and it's a problem, then I think it's worth working on. But aside from that, I think there's better ways to spend that study time.
Yeah.
And I think improving the accent, or smoothing or polishing, what have you, it's good, but there comes a point when it doesn't add value anymore,
Yeah.
and unless you're an actor, and that's putting money in your pocket to be able to speak like an American or speak like a Brit. But I think that time is better spent in other places. Really, I do.
Yes, yes. I think so as well. Like you said, I think there is a certain level where you can try to eliminate probably your accent if you have a very thick accent and people are not able to understand you. But beyond that point, I think it doesn't really doesn't serve too much of a purpose unless, like you mentioned, you're getting paid specifically to sound like a native speaker.
Yeah.
And another question I had here was, I don't know which project of yours they're referring to. I'm presuming it's the Budapest Street Project. Somebody wants to know what are some tips to manage a project like that? Have you faced any difficulties? How do you get people? I'm sure you have others involved as well. And how do you manage a project like that?
Yeah, that's trial and error is really important. And I've heard this quote that really stuck with me, and it was Brené Brown said this. She said, "It's not important to be right. It's important to get it right."
Yeah.
And especially when you're starting something new that you don't have any experience in.
Yeah.
In the early days, I was looking at YouTube view counts, and I was looking at, response rates for surveys, and I was starting to feel like a little bit down, or like, oh, this isn't going to work, or people don't care, and I really had to check that part. That's an ego-driven thing as well, So instead, I just try to refine the process, bring more people into the project. That's been the key, is to involve more people.
Yeah.
Ask people to help, give them things to do, and check back with them regularly. That for me was the big difference. And if you don't ask, you certainly don't get. That's another thing that has been invaluable to me. The worst that can happen is the person says no. And right?
Yes, that's true. Yes, we had a few more questions, but I think we have already covered them in our discussion. Somebody wanted to have some tips about a job interview, but I think we already covered it, and you gave us a lot of. Okay, you can.
Can I?
Yeah, sure.
I do interview coaching as well as part of my portfolio as a freelancer. And one thing that, when I coach people for who are looking for jobs, I would say this: if you are preparing for job interviews, you need stories from your life.
Yeah.
You need a story about a conflict that you were in and how you resolved it. That's one. You need a story about you working together with the team, how you manage different personalities. Just a story, one story, right? You need a story about how you're developing yourself, right? And these stories are of great importance when you're in your job interview, because they say the right things about you. Now, there's also some pitfalls in the interview and trick questions in the interview. For example, tell me about yourself. Now, this is the best question as an interviewee that you can get, because the ball is in your court. You can do whatever you want with it. You can go anywhere you want. Use that time to, wave your biggest flags. For example, if to celebrate your biggest achievements. Find a way to put those things about you into the interview, and you can do that with stories. So tell me about yourself. If you waste that time talking about the facts about your life, I don't think that says the best things about you. But if you use that time to tell little stories about what you're passionate about, what's important to you, who you are, your values, the way you work, that says so much good things about you. If you don't know yourself, your communication style, your work style, your personality type, if you don't know these things, if you don't know yourself, then it's hard for an employer to put you into their team. But if you know exactly who you are, your personality style, the way you prefer to work, all of these things, they can immediately find a place in their mind for you, and it increases your chances of getting hired astronomically. So get these things. The more you know about yourself, the better. Yeah.
Yes, I think, like you mentioned, if you use that time to just state whatever you've probably written already in your CV, it doesn't really give them any additional information, and they want to get a taste of your character and who you are, your personality in the interview, and not merely reiterate the facts that you already probably submitted in some kind of written format. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that was great talking to you, Alex. And before we wrap up, I would like you to maybe give our viewers a bit, a short kind of information about your services, what you offer in Budapest, or can anybody who is not in Budapest also train with you, and maybe give them some information about, of course, we already spoke about the Budapest Street Project and the website, about your coaching services.
Sure. So about the Budapest Street Project, we have a volunteer event the first Saturday of the month. The next one's December the 5th. And go to budapeststreetproject.com, and you can see there's a link there, and you fill out the survey. So if you'd like to volunteer with us, there's a few options available there. So please do that. To get in touch with me directly, it's alexmacintosh.com. And you can see there all the menu of things that I do for training, and kind of what I'm up to as far as my professional life. And I'm on LinkedIn as well, and you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm a big LinkedIn fan, and that's another thing for any of the students out there, that now is the time to start getting onto to LinkedIn and start to grow your followers. Because one thing that I found here in Budapest is that my network has given me so much in terms of my customers and leads, friends, activities, everything. So this is a good time, this pandemic time, to work on your network. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Alex, for being on our show and giving us a lot of tips. And I really hope that you continue your amazing work that you're doing, and that we probably inspire some of our viewers to maybe contribute in whatever manner they can to
Great.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Anybody out there who wants to get in touch with me, ask me another question, that's free to do. So please get in touch with me if you want to ask me something.
Yes, thank you. And I want to thank all the guys who tuned in to our live stream as well. So that was the 4th episode of our podcast, and this was the first time that we were streaming it live. Anyways, I hope all you guys enjoyed our chat with Alex today, and I think he provided us a lot of valuable insights and tips. And yeah, thank you guys for listening, and see you next time. Bye.